We're going to talk about rejection, abandonment, daddy issues.
And I got a phone call that just completely changed the trajectory of my life. I found out in that phone call that my mom had been having an affair, and it was with the worship leader at our church. What? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a joke, right? Like, or in my mind, I'm like, well, they can fix this. Like, it's going to be okay. You know, like, she might as well have just said, I'm leaving you. But then the next time I would come back to visit, it was just like totally different.
Yeah.
She was gone. I'm floundering, like, I'm questioning, like, what's real, what's fake? Like, they've told me all these things my whole life, and none of it's true, and I'm doubting my faith, I'm doubting the church because of the way the church responded to her.
How did they respond to her?
You're, like, just leave, like, you're out of here, you're gone, you know, and you're not welcome back. I won't even get into the specifics, but I ended up finding out that this affair was not the first one. And the first one actually happened prior to when I was born. Long story short, I found out my dad was not my biological father. He wanted to love me 100% like as his own child and not and I decided, okay, I want to find him. So long story short, we find my biological father.
To Build podcast, a refuge for authenticity. Each episode, you'll be reminded that our scars are the foundation of our strengths. You will feel seen, known, and loved as you find beauty in the brokenness while you build the extraordinary life you were created to live.
Hey there. Welcome back to another episode of the Broken to Build podcast. I am your host, Lauryn DeLoach, and I have another Lauren joining me today, Lauren Preusz.
Yep.
Did I say that right?
You did.
Preusz. I know it gets mispronounced a lot.
All the time.
Yeah. So today is a really interesting episode. I was actually telling my husband what we were going to be talking about, and he goes, her story is kind of like a Maury Povich.
It's 100% Maury Povich
episode.
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? So we're excited that you're joining us today. We're going to talk about rejection, abandonment, daddy issues, and all of the things.
In-between.
Yeah, all the in-between, and then how God restores. Mm-hmm. So we will jump right in.
Okay.
So tell us first a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Such an honor. So as you already said, my name is Lauren, another classic 80s name. I live locally. I moved here. I moved here originally to go to PBA, and met my husband, and we fell in love with this area. So, we moved up to Indiana for a little while after school and came back. I work as a mental health counselor. I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I have 3 kids. My oldest is 10, she's a girl, and then 2 boys, 8 and 6, who are the same height and weight, and all they do is wrestle all day long, all day.
It's so fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and also just I don't know. Some days I'm like, what is my life? I don't know.
It doesn't stop when they get older. The other night, the other night, my 14-year-old was kicking a soccer ball at my 16-year-old who was laying on the ground. Mm-hmm. And the 16-year-old was trying to block it, and the 14-year-old kept kicking it, trying to hit his nuts. Yeah, and I was like, why is this a game? Like, why is this fun?
They sit like with their legs open, facing each other, like throwing stuff at each other. I'm like,
totally. Why is this a game?
Yeah. When they have friends over, I'm like, I have to like preface like with the mom, like, listen, I'm so sorry if they come home and they're like, hey, guess what game we played today?
Game. Yeah. Exactly. Well, let's just dive right into your story.
Okay.
And it starts when you're 19. The Maury episode starts at 19.
Is when like everything kind of hit the fan.
Okay. So is there a preface like leading up to that?
Well, leading up to it, my childhood is honestly pretty like normal, I guess.
Okay. Whatever normal is.
Yeah, exactly. So I was born in Louisiana. I lived there until I was almost 10. Then we moved to Iowa. So there's some of that like kind of plays into my story where I dealt with rejection and abandonment, for sure. Just like different things I went through at school and with boys and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so then I came down here for school, and it was my sophomore year. It was in October. And so the beginning of the school year, and I got a phone call that just completely changed the trajectory of my life. So I found out in that phone call that my mom had been having an affair, and it was with the worship leader at our church, like from where I was from.
Did you know him?
I knew him.
Okay.
Yeah, not well. He was kind of newer, and then I moved away to school. So I think he like came in right before I moved down to school.
Okay.
So she told me that, and
she called you and told you.
She called me and told me.
Okay.
And in that moment, it was kind of like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a joke, right? Like, or in my mind, I'm like, well, they can fix this. Like, it's going to be okay. But then goes on to say, I'm leaving your father. And so that was just like my world was just totally flipped upside down, because up to that, we grew up in the church. My parents were both pretty involved in the church.
Yeah.
So like your kind of classic like Christian family, no drama.
Yeah.
I don't even really remember them ever fighting growing up.
Okay.
So it just came as such a like, where's this coming from? You know? Like I was in utter shock for so long.
Yeah. How did that affect the abandonment and rejection, but also maybe self-worth? Did that have any effect on that?
Oh yeah, because it felt like now, all these years later, I have done so much work, and I realize that decision was not an intentional hurt to me, right? Like I think as children of divorce, it's easy to feel like, well, I'm the one being left, Yeah. And in essence, yes, but it's not that wasn't like what her reason for it.
Right. To hurt her kids.
Right. Like she's in her own hurt, right?
Yeah.
And dealing with her own stuff. But to me, it felt very personal. Like, I am leaving you, like she might as well have just said, I'm leaving you.
Right. Because she was leaving your dad, and that essentially and your family.
And my little sister was still there in high school.
Okay.
So I felt obviously fiercely protective over her, and knowing that she was home dealing with that all by herself. And for me, I'm like, I've already moved out of the home. But then the next time I would come back to visit, it was just like totally different.
Yeah.
She was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I will say like, well, and we'll probably get to this in my story. Like my mom and I have a wonderful relationship now. It's not like she's out of the picture.
Right.
But for a time, it felt that way.
Yeah.
So that was the first part.
Yes.
And then.
Which is a lot.
I want to get to the Maury Povich stuff.
Okay, yeah. Keep going.
So,
is there midgets going to come out and hit people with chairs?
Maybe. Maybe I'll shock you.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that next year was just kind of like, I'm floundering. Like I'm questioning like, what's real? What's fake? Like they've told me all these things my whole life and none of it's true. And I'm doubting my faith. I'm doubting the church because of the way the church responded to her.
How did they respond to her?
It was very like, you're like, just leave. Like, you're out of here. You're gone, and you're not welcome back.
Okay. For her and the worship pastor.
Which to me, it's like, listen, I don't run a church. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like what those policies should look like. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like Jesus.
Okay.
The way that they were treated.
Yeah.
A lot of people just completely abandoned them. As friends, even family members.
Yeah.
So that was hard for me to see too.
Yeah. It's hard, in Matthew 18, it talks about the way that we deal with conflict. And when it gets to the last step, it talks about if they won't listen to the church, like there's a way that the Lord wants us to handle conflict. But then at the end, it says, if they won't listen, then treat them as a tax collector, which sounds harsh, but if you look at the way Jesus treated tax collectors, he went to dinner with them.
Right.
He went out of his way to love them.
Yeah.
They might not have been in the community of gathering on Sundays, but it wasn't like they were shunned. It was like,
and they were shunned.
Right.
And there were some people that have stayed with them through it all, which I am so grateful for.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was hard.
Yeah.
And then of course to watch my dad just be heartbroken.
Yeah.
And alone. Like that was awful.
Did he have any idea that it was happening?
That's a really good question. I try not to ask too many questions.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh.
Yeah, you don't know. Yes, totally. Totally.
So that was a rough year.
Yeah.
Needless to say. Yeah. Like it was really hard the next time I came home from school. Like I said, it was just utter heartbreak. And then, okay, I don't want to get too detailed, but, so about a year later, I won't even get into the specifics, but I ended up finding out that this affair was not the first one. And the first one actually happened prior to when I was born.
Okay.
So long story short, I found out my dad, who raised me and still to this day is my dad, I call him dad, of course, was not my biological father. So that was like on top of what I had already gone through. Now it's like, oh, cool. Like, is there anything else that you guys want to tell me? So then it was like, okay, here I am suffering from this like feeling of abandonment and loss of just like what my family used to be. And now I'm going to also pile on identity crisis, in a way. Because it's like, well, you've said all of these things all of my life. Now I don't know what to believe because I've been essentially lied to.
Did your dad know your whole life that you weren't biologically his?
Great question. So technically, no. They did not choose to find out.
Okay.
But it was a pretty, from what it sounds like, from what I've gathered, is it was kind of obvious in a way. Like they had a pretty good knowing that that was the case. But, and I will forever just respect my dad for this choice. But he didn't want to find out because he wanted to love me 100% like as his own child and not sorry, I really was like,
you're
I'm not
good.
Do this
you're
today.
good.
And have no biases like against me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I couldn't be more thankful to him for that choice in a way. It's kind of like no matter which path you were to go down in that situation, I've put myself in their shoes 100 times. Like, what would I have done with my kids? And I don't know. I don't think that there's like, either way, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So.
But what a beautiful picture of your dad and how God is with us. Like once we are like he loves us like we're his own.
For sure.
And he makes that choice to do that.
Yes. And my dad has never not felt like my dad. Like he is my dad.
Yeah.
But the beauty that ended up coming from that is, so then, a couple years later, because I didn't want to do anything. Like once we took that DNA test, I was like.
That's how you found out was a DNA
we did a
test.
DNA test. I was like, you know what? I don't want to do anything right now because there is a man out there who is my father who was also having an affair. What if he didn't tell his wife? What if they're still together? I don't want to be the person to go blow it up.
To show up on their doorstep and be like, yeah.
And I was like, what if he rejects me? So that was a huge, like, I was like, I can't handle any more of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
what I just want to interrupt you and kind of touch on how did this situation affect the way that you see God as a father?
So funny enough about that. So as a counselor, like this is kind of something I touch on with my clients often is that I think I'm kind of still working through that one, but I certainly felt for a while that God was just like distant. I felt like when everything happened with the affair, and my parents getting divorced, like I've never felt more alone in my life.
Yeah.
And granted, I wasn't necessarily reaching out to God myself. Like I certainly turned towards the world for comfort, and that's all a part of my story too.
Yeah.
Which was not healthy. But he was always there. I just didn't feel it. I didn't feel him there. It felt kind of like, well, who are you, God? Like, and where are you? So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. And I know Erin and I were actually talking about this morning because I've had my own things with seeing God as a father with my dad. Like my dad and I have a great relationship of what we can have. But growing up, he was a cop and it just, you see a lot of negative in the world and you come home and if you don't work through that, you have to bear
Oh my goodness.
that. And he's also a product of his environment. And so for years, I didn't feel loved by him. I felt like I was loved because I'm his daughter, but I could be anyone. Like he has to love me because I'm his daughter, not because he actually loved me.
Right.
And then as I got older and started doing the work, I'm like, oh, he gives love the way that he's capable.
Exactly. And all of us do the same thing, you know, like they love us the best they can with what they know and what like cards they were dealt, you know, and my dad's not like an overly communicative person, and he was going through his heartache as well. Yeah. So we were both like mourning and grieving in our own way from opposite sides. And it was almost, and here we are across the country. He's in California, I'm in Florida. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It when I hear, so for a long time I had trouble seeing God as my father, but now when I hear songs that say like God, my father, like that touches me so deeply because I'm like, oh my gosh. And Aaron and I were just talking, he was listening to a John Mark Comer interview, and he was talking about how Jesus changed things radically when the disciples were asking him how to pray. And he said, pray like this. And my Father who art in heaven, because up till that point, no other religion had referred to God as their father. Like that is the relationship, and he's our Father. And that's why Jesus taught him to pray like that. And so I'm on a journey too with that. And that's why I was wondering, because it's like, man, these little revelations that we get when we compare, some people might have their earthly father is amazing and they see God as a father and it's easy for them. But when it's harder, it's a process.
Well, and I almost feel like I have so many fathers.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
now I have like 5.
You know, I have my dad, my father, my biological father, and then my mom's husband. Like they all play a fatherly role in my life. And so it's like, who's my daddy? You know? No, I'm just kidding. But
I love it.
So anyway,
back to the story.
Okay, so I decided to wait for a while, and then I don't know timelines. I would have to to find that out. But I know I was in Indiana for grad school, so it was after college, and I decided, okay, I want to find him. So long story short, we find my biological father.
Did you have any idea where he was, or was it a needle in a haystack type?
I didn't really do because my mom had known him. She actually helped me, and he was in the same place, so it wasn't too hard to find.
Okay.
But he received the news with such open arms, which was another healing part of my story, because again, that was a huge fear that I had of like, well, what if he rejects me too?
Right.
You know, and it's like, I don't need another dad, but like, he's my father, you know, like I'm a part of him. I want to know this man that I didn't get to know my whole life.
How did you do that? Did you call him on the phone? Did you show up at his door?
So I can't even remember. Somebody called him for me.
Okay.
No, I don't see. Some of this gets fuzzy.
Okay.
But we started our relationship as like email.
Okay.
And then it moved to a phone call. And then we met in person, which was just wild. Absolutely wild.
Do you look like him? Or resemblance?
It's kind of hard to answer that about yourself. But yeah, people do say.
Okay.
But the craziest part too was that I found out I had an older sister. And I used to lay in bed as a little girl and pray for an older sister. I mean, I love my little sister, but I always thought big sisters were like super cool. And I really wanted a big sister.
So it was an answered prayer.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So that has been such a beautiful part of the redemption aspect of the story as well. Is like, now I view them as like bonus family.
Yes.
You know, like how awesome that now I get to be a part of their life. They get to be a part of mine. And we have these awesome relationships. They're both believers. Like, what are the odds?
Wow.
So that's been incredible.
That's cool. And then I got to hear a little bit of your story from your sister's side, because your sister was friends with Jackie.
My older sister.
Your older sister.
Yes.
And before Jackie told me
they
little
were roommates in college.
Yeah, of like, hey, I'm going to go meet this girl and she's my sister. And like.
So crazy.
That's amazing.
I know. That's how I know Jackie.
Yeah.
Through Kristen.
Yeah. Which I love that.
Yeah.
So you've got this bonus family now. Mm-hmm. You've got your dad, your mom, who is still married to.
Yeah. So they got married.
Okay.
And they're still together.
Okay.
So, and they've actually, what's cool about their story is they've turned their brokenness into, they run a nonprofit for people in ministry that are burnt out. Because that happens a lot.
Yes.
Ministry burnout. And in those places is when people tend to sin.
Yeah.
Right? So their hope is that they can prevent things like what they went through. Because obviously their road after that was not easy.
Right.
And so, their hope is that through their story, they can help people as well. So that's kind of cool that they're able to do that.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that you're an author. You've written a book.
I have.
And am I allowed to tell people what it's about?
Yeah,
of course. Okay. So you talk about people pleasing.
Yes. The whole premise is people pleasing.
And so that was one of your coping mechanisms that you found during this time. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay. So I think the roots of it really kind of started much younger, like with the moving and trying to fit in. And I had this like thick Southern drawl that was not acceptable in Iowa. I was like, I got to stop talking like this. I need to talk like these people now. You know? So I like got rid of my Southern accent somehow. So I think it started before that. And just, classic girl trying to fit in, be liked, that sort of thing. But certainly got worse after the things that I went through because the feeling of rejection and abandonment, there's nothing, in my opinion, quite like that feeling of just truly feeling like totally alone. So people pleasing definitely became a coping mechanism because it's like, okay, well, what can I do to make sure I feel liked and loved?
Yes.
Because
to never feel alone again.
Yes. And that's it. Underneath it all is this fear of being alone.
Yeah.
So if I can keep people close to me, then I don't have to be alone. And if people like me, if people want to be around me, well, then that gives me worth.
Yeah.
And underneath it all, that is people pleasing. It's finding your worth in something, in people rather than God, right?
Yeah.
So my book poses people pleasing as an addiction.
Okay.
And because an addiction is, basically anytime we need something, whether it's a substance, a thought process, behavior, in order to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
This like deep desire and like we'll go to any lengths to get it.
Yep.
And so in my opinion, I'm like, well, people pleasing is exactly that. It's an addiction. It's like I am feeding. It's like my supply is people liking me.
Right.
And then if I get that, then I'm good. So
tell me
the whole book is about that.
Tell me some of the ways that you have overcome that. If they like practical, someone that's listening right now that maybe deals with abandonment, rejection, has used that to kind of cope. What's some good practical advice that you would give?
Okay. Well, so the premise of the book the purpose of the book walks the reader through the 12 steps of recovery. So because I pose it as an addiction, it's like, okay, well, how do you get clean from an addiction? Recovery.
Okay.
So each chapter models a step.
Okay.
Step 1 is simply recognizing the problem.
Right.
So that to me is a problem within itself because I think so many people, especially in the Christian world, view people pleasing as like a badge of honor. Like, well, I'm just like really caring. I just love people so much.
Love to serve.
I'm so nice. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they don't recognize that it's an issue. And but they're actually like totally burnt out. They're so exhausted. They say yes to everything. They don't even know what they want anymore. They don't know what they like because it's all about, well, I just have to keep everybody around me okay.
Yeah.
So step 1 is like, no, this is a problem.
Yeah.
Like I am idolizing people.
Yeah.
And I have dethroned God and I've put people on the throne where he belongs. So recognizing it, as elementary as that might sound, is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Because we can't ever heal from anything until we're able to say it out loud.
Right.
Tell somebody.
Yeah.
That's part of the 12 steps. It's like confession.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very biblical. Like Jesus calls us to confess. It's basically just to speak the truth out loud. Because when we do that, we take it from the darkness and we put it in the light, and then the Lord can heal it.
Yeah. And somehow the darkness, keeping it a secret, makes it so much more intense.
Yes.
Than when you can say it out loud and like, hey, I'm a people pleaser. Like,
right.
I struggle with this.
Right.
All of a sudden, it's not quite as intense and scary. It's like, oh, okay. It's in the light.
Because the power has been stripped.
Yes.
But in the darkness is where that grows.
Yes.
And that's where the enemy just loves us to keep things.
Yes. Which is why you need community like this.
Yes.
To be vulnerable. You need those people to be able to share. We need to have these conversations, because a lot of times at Big C Church, we don't have these conversations.
Right.
That, like, people need to know that there's real stuff out there, and that there's real ways to deal with these things that are keeping us trapped, that ultimately we could live in freedom from.
Right. Exactly.
So what are, when talking about abandonment, rejection, people pleasing, as you've come so far and as you've healed, what were some of the experiences where you realized that you are getting healed from some of these traumas? And like, what were some of those things where you're like, oh, I'm releasing this, like I'm getting free?
Yes. I think for me, a big one was learning boundaries, and actually implementing them, and then being able to be okay if the other person wasn't okay.
Do you have a specific time that you could share? You don't have to share names or anything, but
I don't know that I have anything super specific. I would need to think about that.
Okay.
But
I know I put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. It could be something as little as like, being asked to do something, even if it's a good thing, like serve at church or take someone's kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. Like, ooh, the word no. Ugh, I hate it.
Like you're about to get punched. No.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
don't be mad at me.
Okay.
So just that, like, I know I can't do that. And no, I don't need to explain myself.
Yeah.
I don't need to give you a whole backstory on why my answer is no.
Yes.
But just saying no, and then, like, you can do what you want with that. And then I can go home and be okay and not lose sleep over it.
Yeah.
For me, that was huge evidence of healing.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I've had tossing and turning, worrying about what people think.
Yeah.
Are they mad at me? Are they upset? She looked at me differently today? Or, I mean, like, really intense.
Yeah.
I really dealt with it, like, pretty severely for a very long time.
Yeah.
And so to be in a place now where I'm like, I just feel so much more freedom.
Yeah.
And I don't spend every waking hour worrying about what other people are thinking.
Do you think some of that comes, because I've done the hard work in therapy, but not for people pleasing necessarily. But I've noticed even as I've gotten older, I care less about what people think now than I did 10 years ago. And now, like, no, like I heard this sentence that no is a complete sentence.
It is.
And I've been using that. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, well, do you want to do this? No.
Yes, and sometimes
that's a
like,
sentence.
I feel so mean.
I know,
but it's not.
But no.
Right.
So do you think, I mean, obviously you've worked on it a lot, and then some of it comes with age. And I'm like, oh, now I see why my grandma was like
100%.
I don't care. Like,
yes, my husband's grandma was the best with that. She would say the most like obscure things that you're like, you can't say that.
Yes.
But she said it so confidently, and
they were like,
okay, this is actually
you can.
amazing.
I remember we're
all thinking it.
I know. My grandma used to do that too. And there was one time this guy walked in, he was doing work on our house, and he was wearing overalls and no shirt on, and he had a nice body. And
but still.
And someone said something to him, because we were friends with his family.
Okay.
Someone said something to him like some nice hat or something like that. And my grandma goes, nice bod. And I was like, Grandma, you can't say it. But she's like, yes, I can.
Yeah,
like,
she's like, I noticed
I don't care.
I wanted to say it.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that we can all get to that point sooner than our grandmas.
Yes,
like,
same.
I want to get to that point now. I mean, not where I'm telling guys they have nice bodies, but like,
I see you.
you know.
No, I agree. I think a lot of it comes with aging and maturity. for sure. I mean, it's just like you said, the older we get, the more confident we become, the more aware we are of who we are, our identity.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I didn't know who I was for a very long time.
Yeah.
So, and
that started with all the things, or even before that.
And that's just part of the process of life.
Yeah.
Because I deal with a lot of, in my practice, a lot of teens and young adults. And I just see it as a theme kind of across the board. It's like people don't really know who they are. They don't know their God-given identity.
Yeah.
Like their specific purpose for why they're here. And I don't think it's anything that they're doing or not doing necessarily. I think that's just kind of a byproduct of coming into, just part of life.
Yeah.
I guess, like walking the path of life. So I think that's part of it. And I would be lying if, I said I don't deal with it anymore and I'm completely free. I still battle people pleasing.
Yeah.
And that's why the working title of my book right now is The Recovering People Pleaser.
Yeah.
So, in recovery, people still kind of identify as, whatever addiction they might have. Like, hi, I'm an alcoholic, or whatever, because they recognize like my tendency might always be to fall into this space. Mm-hmm. Could God totally come in and take it away? Yes, 100%. I think he could. Does he always? No.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of see it like that. Like this is something I might always battle. Mm-hmm. But I know what to do now when I'm in that place. I'm not going to stay there as long as I would have before.
Yes. I love that. So. On a different note, other than people pleasing, I'm imagining that forgiveness is a huge part of your story. So tell me a little bit about how you worked through some of the, because you could have stayed stuck and been offended and all the things, but tell me a little bit about the forgiveness journey with all of the people.
Okay. Yes. So I will say I do believe that forgiveness is a gift that the Lord has given me. I have never been one to really hold grudges. I have a really hard time staying mad at people. I'm very forward thinking, so I can very quickly forget, and just be like, oh, it's fine.
Yes.
That was in the past. Like, and sometimes to the point where I have to be like, okay, no, Lauren, like you should probably think about that a little more and process like more how it affected you. So the forgiveness piece never really felt very difficult for me. It did take a little while after the initial like blow for sure. But it honestly, I think was just God-given. Like the grace that I was able to give to everybody was straight from the Holy Spirit. Like, I don't think that's anything I could have done on my own. Yeah. I mean, I put myself in the position of like, okay, God, I'm going to choose this. I choose this forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I have noticed it's not like it was like this one and done. Like, I forgive you. Let's move on. And we're in, going down the yellow brick road.
Right.
There have been a lot of things that have happened in my life since then, specifically becoming a parent and having children that have almost like reopened wounds.
Yeah.
And then I've had to go through and like re-forgive. And God has pointed out like, hey, you're holding on to some stuff. There's some bitterness there. Like, lay that down before me. And so that's something I still have to do sometimes.
I love that. And that happens when we have a growth mindset, when we're open for the Lord to keep showing, keep revealing, because we're all a work in progress. We're all broken and it's all a journey. And so people that say I'm sure there are people that say it's not a journey and that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. My life's been a journey.
Mine too.
And I'm sure it will continue.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have forgiven your mom, your stepdad, your dad, like all the people.
Yes.
And my question is, have you forgiven the church? Because I know you went through some church hurt.
Yes.
And I have to know that you've forgiven because you are part of the church, the Big C church, the community. So tell me what that was like. I'm sure there's people out there, because we get such a response when we talk about church hurt, which makes me really sad. And by the way, church hurt is people hurt. It's Christian hurt. It's not God hurt. We call it church hurt, but it's people hurt.
It's a bunch of, imperfect people coming together.
Right.
Of course, there's
going to be hurt. There's going to be things. So what would you tell someone out there that maybe has gone through that, and what did that look like for you?
Okay. Well, I think you hit it spot on with saying like it's not God hurt. And that's exactly it. So it wasn't God. It was a human response to what happened. People were hurt by their choice too. They were hurt as well. Like they looked up to them. They were let down. And we all kind of respond out of our own place of hurt. And that looks differently for everybody. So yeah, from afar, my 19-year-old mind, I was like, screw the church. Like, look how they're responding to them.
Yeah.
And so I pulled way back from my faith for a good probably year or so. And then there was a chapel service. So at PBA, they make you go to chapel.
Okay.
And there was a chapel service that rocked my world. It was the most divine intervention. I remember exactly where I was sitting. It was at First Baptist downtown, which is now Family Church downtown. Yeah. I know exactly where I was sitting. And there was a message that just grabbed a hold of my heart. And it was about Peter getting out of the boat and walking on the water to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise of the sermon was when you're sitting in that boat that feels so comfortable to you, like you've built up this almost like safety net of like, I'm safe in here.
Yeah.
But Jesus is calling you out and to come to him. That's all he says. He says, come. And then I'm going to tear up just thinking about it, but just this beautiful picture of like Peter getting out of the boat, like trusting the Lord's beckon to him to come. And he gets out and he steps on the water and he walks to him. And the pastor was like, will you come? And I was like, yes, Jesus, I will come. And I mean, from that moment on, my heart literally did a 180. I broke up with the boyfriend I was with, very unhealthy relationship. I stopped hanging out with 80% of my friends because I was making really terrible choices, living a very sinful lifestyle. And my heart completely changed. So it was after that moment where I just came back to the Lord and started seeking him again. And then I graduate and moved to Indiana, and Jordan and I became a part of this church called Heartland that, I mean, was very instrumental in building that faith back up. Just meeting like real authentic people. We joined a small group, and it was just like a slow transformation process of like, you know what? It's not the church. I was hurt by sin.
Yeah.
That's not the Lord.
Right.
And this is a place where we just come and worship him and we learn about him. Like I need that in my life. I don't want that to not be a part of my life.
Yeah.
So
I love that. And I love how the Lord met you exactly where you needed him to meet you. Like the thing that you were made to do, like we have to go to chapel, that you weren't going expecting that day, like Lord to change your life. Again. Right. Right. And I just feel like there's probably someone out there that is going through the same thing where they're like, I don't want this. I don't need God, but he will always show up.
Always.
Right where you need him and probably where you least expect him. Yeah. So whether it's a phone call or a flyer or a song or whatever it is, like if you ask him, he will show up. Mm-hmm. And maybe you weren't asking, but even when you don't ask him, he'll show up.
But I heard him and I knew I was hearing him.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we know that God is trying to speak to us and we choose not to listen. Mm-hmm. And if we just respond to that invitation that Jesus gives us to just come.
Yeah.
Like what can happen?
Right. So I love it. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story, your Maury story.
Anytime.
And this has been great. And I've just loved every minute of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode today. And make sure you tune in for next week's episode.